If you can already understand slow English, stop feeling comfortable because slow is not the same as fluent. And in the next few minutes, you're going to hear exactly why. Say it out loud right now, even in a whisper. I am ready to hear real English, not the textbook version, because today we're not doing another lazy listening exercise where you just relax and let words float past you. Today, you're going to walk straight into a real-life conversation. The kind that happens fast, the kind that uses vocabulary you've probably never actually needed before. And by the end, you're going to understand it without translating a single word in your head. If this is your first time here, welcome to Natural Word English. The channel where we don't teach you random phrase lists. We teach you advanced vocabulary the way it actually gets used, inside real situations, real conversations, real emotions. Every word you learn here, you'll learn it attached to a moment, a feeling, a person, so it sticks in your memory instead of sliding out the other side 5 minutes later. Here's the method, and I want you to understand this in under 90 seconds, because it matters. Most learners try to memorize vocabulary the way you'd memorize a shopping list. Word, definition. Next word, definition. That approach fails because your brain doesn't store isolated facts well. It stores stories. It stores context. Think about the last time you forgot someone's name. Someone's name 5 seconds after meeting them. Meeting them. But you can still remember exactly what they were wearing or the joke they made. That's context doing the work that memorization can't. So, instead of throwing 60 words at you in a list, I'm going to hand you these words wrapped inside real conversations, real tension, real relief, real surprise, so your brain files them under things that happened to me. Not things I was told to remember. That's the whole secret. Context beats repetition every single time. So let's start slow, the way you're used to. Picture a quiet Sunday morning. You're sitting in a cafe near a window. The light is soft. Somebody nearby is speaking gently, calmly. The words spaced out, easy to catch. This is the English you've grown comfortable with, isn't it? Nice and slow. I'm going to describe a woman named Claire sitting at that same cafe table waiting for someone. She checks her phone. She looks toward the door. She looks calm on the surface. Nothing dramatic is happening yet. This is the kind of scene where slow listening feels effortless. Almost too easy. Now here's the moment. Everything shifts. The door opens, and a man walks in fast, out of breath, and instead of the slow, careful English you were just enjoying, he starts talking the way real people actually talk when they're stressed. Sentences overlapping, words blending together, no pauses for you to catch your breath. This is where most learners freeze. But you're not going to freeze, because I'm going to slow this exact conversation down first, teach you the vocabulary and the sound patterns hiding inside it, and then speed it back up so you can shadow it in real time. By the end of this lesson, that fast, chaotic, real conversation is going to sound almost as easy as the slow cafe scene did a minute ago. That's the promise, and I'm going to keep it. Let's build the first block of vocabulary around this exact idea. The difference between how people sound when they're calm and how they sound when something disrupts that calm. Our first word is composed. If someone is composed, it means they're calm and in control of their emotions, even in a difficult moment. It's a step up from just saying calm. Calm can describe a quiet afternoon, but composed usually describes a person holding themselves together under pressure. Picture this. Claire had just found out. Her flight was delayed by 6 hours, and yet she remained remarkably composed, calmly rebooking her connection instead of panicking at the counter. Notice that. Composed isn't about not feeling stress. It's about not letting the stress control your behavior. Here's a short, natural exchange using it. You seem so composed for someone whose whole trip just fell apart. Honestly, panicking wouldn't get me a new flight any faster. Try saying that response yourself, out loud, right now. Honestly, panicking wouldn't get me a new flight any faster. Good. That's exactly the tone native speakers use. Dry, a little self-aware, not dramatic. Our second word connects directly to that man who burst through the cafe door, frazzled. If you're frazzled, you're mentally exhausted and a little disorganized because of stress or too many things happening at once. It's almost the opposite of composed. Picture this. By the time he reached the cafe, he looked completely frazzled, his jacket half on, his phone buzzing nonstop in his hand. Here's a natural line you could actually use today. Sorry I'm late. I've had the most frazzled morning imaginable. Say that with me. Sorry I'm late. I've had the most frazzled morning imaginable. Notice how much more specific and honest that feels than just saying, I'm tired, or it's been a busy day. Frazzled tells your listener exactly what kind of tired you mean. Now let's slow down and listen to how native speakers actually connect these words in real speech, because this is where a lot of learners lose the thread even when they know the vocabulary. When people speak quickly, sounds blend together. Listen to the difference between the slow, careful version, version, and the fast, natural version of this sentence. What is going on with you today? Spoken slowly. You hear every word clearly separated. But in fast, natural speech, it becomes something closer to what's going on with you today. The words what is collapse into wada, almost like one word. This is called connected speech, and it happens constantly in real conversation. Try it yourself. First, say it slowly. What is going on with you today? Now try the fast, natural version. What's going on with you today? You don't need to force this sound perfectly, but training your ear to expect it means you won't panic when you hear it from a real person. Let's add another example of this same pattern. The phrase, I don't know, almost never gets pronounced with three separate clear words in fast speech. It usually comes out closer to I don't know. Slow version, I don't know what happened. Fast, connected version, I don't know what happened. This isn't sloppy English, and it isn't something only careless speakers do. Educated, careful speakers use this pattern constantly in casual conversation. The formal version stays for writing and formal speech. The connected version is simply how real spoken English behaves. Nice work getting through that first phonetic block. Your ear is already adjusting, even if you don't feel it yet. Let's keep building the scene and add more vocabulary as the conversation between Claire and this frazzled man, whose name is Daniel, starts to unfold. Daniel finally sits down across from Claire, and before he even says hello properly, he blurts out an apology. To blurt something out means to say it suddenly and without thinking it through first, often because you're anxious or excited. Picture this. Daniel blurted out an apology before he'd even caught his breath, the words tumbling out faster than he could organize them. Here's a mini dialogue to show you how it sounds in context. Claire says, "Daniel, breathe. What happened?" Daniel replies, "I just blurted out to my boss that I was quitting, and I don't even know if I meant it." Claire responds, "Wait, you what?" Daniel continues, I know, it just came out. We were in the middle of this argument about the project timeline, and I snapped. Claire asks, "Okay, walk me through it slowly. What exactly did you say to him?" Daniel answers, "I told him the deadline was unrealistic, and that if he wasn't going to listen to the team, maybe he needed someone else in my role." Claire says, "That's actually a pretty reasonable thing to say, even if it came out messy." Daniel sighs. "It didn't feel reasonable in the moment. It felt like my mouth was moving faster than my brain." Notice how that conversation has 6 full lines back and forth, not just 2 short exchanges. Real conversations breathe like that, one idea leading naturally into the next. And that's exactly the pattern you need your ear trained on, not just short textbook question and answer pairs. Let's pull 2 more words out of that exchange. First, to snap, in this emotional sense, means to suddenly lose your patience and react sharply, often saying something you didn't plan to say. It's different from snapping a stick in half. Here, it describes an emotional break. Picture this. After weeks of holding his frustration in, Daniel finally snapped during the meeting, and the words just came pouring out. Try this sentence yourself. I don't usually snap at people, but today just pushed me too far. Say it with feeling, the way you'd actually say it if you were a little embarrassed about losing your temper. Second, unrealistic. This one you might already know at a basic level, but let's make sure you're using it with precision. Unrealistic describes an expectation, plan, or deadline that isn't practical or achievable given the actual circumstances. Picture this. The deadline felt completely unrealistic. Unrealistic the moment they announced it, especially with half the team already stretched thin on other projects. Here's a workplace-ready line for you. I want to hit this deadline, but honestly, the current timeline feels unrealistic without more support. Say that out loud. Notice how much more professional and precise that sounds than simply saying, "This is too much work." Now, here's your first role play moment, and I want you to actually participate, not just listen passively. Imagine you're Claire, and Daniel has just told you. He snapped at his boss. I'm going to read Daniel's line, and then I want you to pause and respond as Claire. Out loud, in your own words, using at least one of today's vocabulary words if you can. Ready? Daniel says, I think I just ruined everything. Claire. What do I even say to fix this? Now pause the video for a moment and answer as Claire. Take your time. Here's an example of what a natural response might sound like, so you can compare it to what you said. You didn't ruin everything. You were honest, even if it came out frazzled and unfiltered. Tomorrow, go back in there composed and actually explain what you meant. Notice how that sample answer naturally reused two of our vocabulary words. Frazzled and composed inside a completely different context than where you first learned them. That's exactly the flexibility you want to build. Let's move to our next block, because Daniel's story is about to shift into something a little deeper. As he starts explaining why he snapped, we're going to explore vocabulary around workplace pressure and personality, because this is where advanced English really separates itself from basic English. Claire asks Daniel a simple but important question. Why now? What made today different from any other stressful day? Daniel takes a breath and admits something. Let's listen to his explanation, spoken naturally, and then we'll slow it down and break apart the vocabulary. Daniel says, honestly, it's been building for months. My manager keeps micromanaging every little detail, and it's exhausting. I can't even send an email without him rewriting it. To micromanage means to control and observe every small detail of someone's work in a way that feels excessive and shows a lack of trust in their ability to do the job independently. Okay. This word carries a slightly negative feeling, so be careful how you use it. You wouldn't usually say it about yourself in a positive way. Picture this. Working under someone who micromanages every decision can slowly drain your confidence, even if you're genuinely good at your job. Try saying this, I don't mind feedback, but I can't work well when someone micromanages every single step. Daniel continues, and here's where a truly advanced word appears. He says, it's not just the micromanaging, though. He's also incredibly dismissive whenever I raise a concern. It's like my opinion doesn't even register. To be dismissive means to treat someone's ideas, feelings, or concerns as if they're not worth taking seriously, often through tone, body language, or a quick brush-off response. Picture this. She raised her hand 3 times during the meeting, and each time he gave a dismissive wave, moving straight on to the next topic without acknowledging her. Here's a sentence you can genuinely use in real professional situations. I felt a bit dismissed in that meeting, and I wanted to circle back and actually finish my point. Notice how much more mature and precise that sounds compared to simply saying, "He didn't listen to me." Let's pause here for a quick phonetic moment, because dismissive and micromanage both carry stress patterns that trip learners up. Listen to the stress in dismissive. Dismiss-ive. The stress lands hard on the middle syllable. Say it slowly first. Dismiss-ive. Now say it at natural speed inside a sentence. He was so dismissive about it. Hear how the stress on that middle syllable actually gets even more emphasized when someone is annoyed or frustrated. Emotion in English often rides directly on top of stress patterns. The angrier or more passionate someone feels, the more exaggerated their sentence stress becomes. Now, for micromanage, the stress falls on the first syllable of the final part. Micromanage. Slow version. Micromanage. Fast, natural version inside a sentence. Stop micromanaging me. Say that with a hint of real frustration in your voice, the way you'd actually say it if you meant it. Stop micromanaging me. Let's add 2 more personality-related words before we move into our next scene shift. The opposite of someone dismissive might be someone receptive. If you're receptive to feedback or new ideas, it means you're open-minded and willing to genuinely consider what someone else is saying, rather than immediately rejecting it. Picture this. Unlike her previous manager, this new one was remarkably receptive, actually adjusting the project plan based on what the team suggested. Try this sentence. I really appreciate how receptive you were to my suggestions in that meeting. And finally, for this block, let's introduce assertive. Being assertive means expressing your opinions, needs, or boundaries clearly and confidently, without being aggressive or apologetic about it. This is a word so many learners want but rarely use correctly, because there's a fine line between assertive and aggressive. And native speakers are careful about which one they choose. Picture this. Daniel realized that what he actually needed wasn't to snap or avoid the conversation entirely, but to be more assertive earlier, before his frustration built up into an explosion. Here's a natural sentence. I'm trying to be more assertive at work instead of just quietly accepting everything. Say it out loud, with confidence in your voice, because the word itself demands that tone. You're doing genuinely well so far. 6 advanced words already locked into real emotional context. Two phonetic patterns trained into your ear, and 1 full role-play exchange completed. That's more real progress than most people make in an entire week of casual listening practice. Let's Take a short breath here, a small pause in the pace just for a moment before we dive back into the conversation. Close your eyes if you're not driving or walking, and just picture the cafe one more time. The quiet hum of conversation around Claire and Daniel. The smell of coffee. The late afternoon light through the window. Let your mind settle for a few seconds. This isn't wasted time. It's actually helping your brain consolidate what you just learned. The same way sleep helps memory. Okay, let's continue. As the conversation between Claire and Daniel deepens, she starts asking him more probing questions. Mock mock. Mock mock. And this is where we'll introduce our next set of vocabulary, centered around emotional honesty and difficult conversations. 2 keys. Listen to this exchange first at natural pace. Claire says, Daniel, be honest with me. Do you actually want to quit, or were you just venting? Daniel pauses before answering, I think I've been in denial about how unhappy I am there. It's easier to blame him than admit the job itself just isn't right for me anymore. Claire nods and says, that takes guts to say out loud. Daniel continues, it does, because once I say it, I can't unsay it. Then I actually have to do something about it. Claire responds, you don't have to decide everything tonight. But you can't keep pretending everything's fine either. Daniel exhales and admits, you're right. I've been putting on a front for months, telling everyone I'm fine when I'm really not. Let's pull vocabulary from that exchange, because there's some genuinely advanced material hiding in there. First, to be in denial means you're refusing to accept or acknowledge a difficult truth, even when part of you probably knows it's real. This phrase gets used constantly in real English, in therapy conversations, in casual chats between friends, in workplace discussions. Picture this. For months, she was in denial about how toxic the friendship had become, making excuses every time someone pointed it out. Try this sentence. I think I was in denial about how much this job was affecting my mental health. Next, to vent means to release built-up emotion, usually frustration or anger, by talking about it, often without expecting the other person to solve anything, just to listen. This is a beautifully useful word because it lets you tell someone exactly what kind of support you need. Picture this. Sometimes I don't need advice. I just need to vent for a few minutes. And I think Daniel needed exactly that. Here's a sentence you can use in real life immediately. Do you mind if I just vent for a second? I don't need you to fix it. I just need to say it out loud. And finally, in this block, the phrase to put on a front, meaning to pretend everything is okay, or to present a false version of yourself to hide how you're really feeling. Picture this. He'd been putting on a front at work for weeks, smiling through meetings while quietly falling apart underneath it. Try saying this. I've been putting on a front lately, and honestly, it's exhausting. Now let's practice the skill of catching main meaning when someone speaks quickly, because this is a real listening skill separate from vocabulary itself. When native speakers talk fast, especially when they're emotional, you don't need to catch every single word. You need to catch the shape of the idea. Listen to this fast version of something, Daniel might say, and don't worry about catching every syllable. Yeah, I guess I've kind of known for a while now that it wasn't really working out, but I just didn't want to deal with it, you know. Yeah, if you caught, roughly, he's known for a while it wasn't working, but he didn't want to deal with it. You caught the main meaning, and that's actually the goal. Native listeners do this constantly with each other, too. They're not decoding every phoneme. They're tracking the shape of meaning and filling gaps naturally. When you don't catch every word, the correct native response is small and natural things like, I see, right. That makes sense. Yeah, I get that. These little responses keep the conversation flowing even when you didn't process 100% of what was said, and that's completely normal. Even for native speakers listening to each other, let's try a quick role play to lock this in. I'm going to read a slightly fast line as if I'm venting to you about a rough week, and I want you to respond with one of those natural filler responses out loud right after I finish. Ready? Honestly, this week has just been one thing after another. My car broke down. My landlord's been ignoring my messages. And I'm just kind of running on empty at this point. Now pause and respond out loud with something like I see, or that sounds exhausting, or yeah, that's a lot. Good. That reflex, responding naturally, even when you're processing quickly, is exactly what separates confident English speakers from hesitant ones. Let's move forward in Claire and Daniel's conversation, because there's a turn coming, and it's going to introduce one of the richest vocabulary blocks of this entire lesson. Eisen, the language of personality and decision-making under pressure. Claire leans in and asks Daniel something more personal. Can I be blunt with you for a second? Daniel says, please, that's exactly what I need right now. Claire continues, I think part of the problem is that you're too accommodating. You let people walk all over you, and then it builds up until you explode. Daniel considers this and responds, that's probably fair. I've always been the type to avoid conflict, even when I shouldn't. Claire adds, there's a difference between being kind and being a pushover, Daniel. You can be both firm and considerate at the same time. Daniel nods slowly and says, I don't think anyone's ever put it that clearly before. Let's unpack this. To be blunt means to speak very directly. And honestly, sometimes in a way that might feel a little uncomfortable, but without any intention to be cruel, just direct. Picture this. I'm going to be blunt with you because I think you deserve the truth more than you deserve comfort right now. Try this sentence. Can I be blunt for a second? I think you're underestimating how good you actually are at this. Next, accommodating describes someone who is very willing to adjust their own needs or preferences to fit what other people want, sometimes to their own detriment. Picture this. She'd always been the accommodating one in every relationship, constantly rearranging her own plans so no one else had to compromise. Here's a natural end sentence. I love that you're so accommodating, but don't forget your own needs matter too. And here's a genuinely advanced idiom worth its own moment. To be a pushover. If someone is a pushover, it means people can easily take advantage of them because they rarely say no or stand up for themselves. Picture this. He'd built a reputation at the office as a pushover. The person everyone dumped extra work on because he never refused. Try this. I used to be such a pushover at work, but I've slowly learned to say no. Let's do one more phonetic teaching moment here, because a pushover gets slurred together constantly in real speech. Slow version, he is a pushover. Fast, connected version, he's a pushover, with he is collapsing into he's, and the whole phrase almost gliding as one breath. Try saying it fast, casually, the way a friend would say it while gossiping lightly about someone. He's such a pushover. Nice work again. You're now deep into this conversation, and notice something important. You haven't needed a single translation this entire time. Every word has arrived wrapped in a feeling, a face, a real exchange between two people. That's the entire engine behind fluency. Feeding your brain, meaning instead of definitions. We're going to pause the emotional intensity of this conversation for just a moment and slow things back down the way we started, because I want to give your brain a little breathing room before we go even deeper into the second half of this lesson. Picture the cafe again. Claire orders 2 more coffees. Daniel sits back in his chair, visibly a little lighter than when he arrived. Outside, the evening light is turning golden. For a moment, neither of them says anything. And that's okay too, because comfortable silence is its own kind of communication. Let's use this quieter moment to teach you a self-practice technique that professional learners use constantly, one that turns passive listening into active spoken fluency you can use even when this video isn't playing. Here's how it works. You describe your immediate surroundings out loud. In English, using the vocabulary you've just learned, layering in what you see, what you hear, and how you feel. Let me model it for you first, using words from today's lesson. I'm sitting here feeling fairly composed, even though my day was a little frazzled earlier. There's soft music playing somewhere nearby, and honestly, I don't need to vent about anything right now. I just feel calm. Notice how naturally those words slotted into a completely ordinary moment. Nothing dramatic, just real observation. Now it's your turn. Pause the video for 30 seconds and describe your own surroundings out loud, using at least 2 of today's words, whatever fits honestly, even if it's simple. There's no wrong answer here. The goal is just activating your mouth and your memory at the same time. Welcome back. However that went for you, you just did something incredibly valuable. You moved vocabulary from passive recognition into active production, which is the single hardest step in language learning, and you did it in under a minute. Let's return to Claire and Daniel, because their conversation is about to shift into something a little more forward-looking, and this next block of vocabulary is going to focus on decisions, courage, and change. Some of the richest emotional territory in advanced English. Daniel sets his coffee cup down and says, "So what do I do now? I can't exactly march back in there tomorrow and demand a raise after threatening to quit." Claire smiles and replies, "No, but you can go in and have an honest conversation instead of an emotional outburst. There's a version of this where you actually come out stronger." Daniel considers that and says, "I guess I've never really thought about confrontation as something that could go well." Claire responds, "That's because you've been avoiding it your whole life, not actually trying it." Daniel laughs a little and admits, "Fair point. So where do I even start?" Claire says, "Start with what you actually want. Not what you're angry about, what you want." Let's pull apart some genuinely useful vocabulary from that exchange. First, an outburst, meaning a sudden, often emotional release of feeling, usually anger, frustration, or excitement. That happens quickly and without much control. Picture this. His outburst in the meeting surprised everyone, especially because he was usually the calmest person in the room. Try this sentence. "I'm sorry about my outburst earlier. That's not usually how I handle things." Next, confrontation, which describes a direct, often tense discussion where disagreement or conflict is addressed openly rather than avoided. This word carries a slightly heavier emotional weight than just conversation or discussion. Picture this. She'd spent years avoiding confrontation entirely, choosing silence over conflict, even when silence cost her far more in the long run. Here's a natural sentence for real use. "I've been avoiding this confrontation for weeks, but I think it's time to just get it over with." Now here's a word worth sitting with for a moment. Outcome. An outcome is simply the result or consequence of a situation, decision, or action, but native speakers use it constantly in professional and personal contexts where result would sound slightly too formal or clinical. Picture this. Whatever the outcome of tomorrow's conversation, at least he'll finally know where he actually stands. Try saying this. "I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but at least I'll have said what I actually mean." Let's slow down again for a phonetic moment, because confrontation is a word learners often mispronounce by placing stress incorrectly. The correct stress pattern is confron, tia, tion, with the strongest emphasis on the third syllable. Say it slowly first. Confrontation. Now hear it inside a natural sentence at speed. "I really don't do well with confrontation." Try saying that yourself, matching the rhythm, letting that third syllable rise slightly in pitch, the way natural stress does. Claire continues the conversation. Saying something that introduces one of today's richest words. She says, "You know, Daniel, The thing about ultimatums is that they only work if you are actually willing to follow through. Daniel asks, "What do you mean?" Claire explains, "You basically gave your boss an ultimatum today, whether you meant to or not. You said, 'Listen to the team or find someone else.' Now you have to decide if you actually meant it." Daniel goes quiet for a second and says, "I think part of me did mean it. I just wasn't ready to admit that out loud." An ultimatum is a final demand or statement, usually telling someone that if they don't do a specific thing, there will be serious consequences. Often, the end of a relationship, job, or agreement. It's a powerful word, and native speakers use it carefully because it signals real seriousness. Picture this. She gave him one final ultimatum. Either he committed to counseling or she was moving out by the end of the month. Try this sentence. "I don't like giving ultimatums, but at this point, I don't see another option." Let's add one more word before we shift into the next role play. To follow through. This phrasal verb means to actually complete an action or promise you made, rather than just talking about it and never doing it. It's essential vocabulary because English speakers use it constantly to judge whether someone is reliable. Picture this. Plenty of people make promises when they're angry, but very few actually follow through once the emotion fades. Try saying this out loud. "I said I'd follow through this time, and for once, I actually meant it." Now here's your second role play moment, and this time we're going to practice the role switching technique properly, the way real conversations demand quick, natural back and forth thinking. I'm going to read Claire's line. Then I want you to respond as Daniel, and then I'll give you a sample response so you can compare your instinct to a natural one. Ready? Claire asks. "So, be honest. If your boss doesn't change anything tomorrow, are you actually going to follow through and leave?" Now pause and respond out loud as Daniel, using your own words. Here's a sample response. "Honestly, I think I am. I've been putting on a front for so long, telling myself it's fine, but I don't think I can keep doing that anymore." Notice that sample response naturally reused. Putting on a front from earlier in the lesson in a completely different sentence structure. That's exactly the kind of flexible reuse that turns vocabulary from something memorized into something owned. Let's keep moving because the conversation is about to shift locations, and that shift is going to open up an entirely new category of vocabulary. The language people use when they're navigating everyday social situations outside of work, ordering food, making plans, dealing with small but real friction in daily life. Claire and Daniel decide to leave the cafe and grab dinner nearby, still talking as they walk. Let's listen to this transition scene. They arrive at a small restaurant, and it's clearly busy tonight. Daniel says, "Ugh, look at this line. I really don't have the patience for this today." Claire replies, "We could always just wing it and try somewhere else." Daniel considers this and says, No, it's fine. I don't want to be picky. Let's just wait. A few minutes pass, and the host finally approaches them. Sorry for the wait. We're a bit short-staffed tonight. It's been chaotic. Claire says, no worries at all. Take your time. As they're seated, Daniel comments, see, that wasn't so bad. I think I was just being impatient because of everything else going on today. Let's pull out some genuinely everyday but advanced vocabulary from that small scene. First, to wing it, an idiom meaning to do something without careful planning or preparation. Improvising, as you go. This phrase shows up constantly in casual native speech. Picture this. They hadn't booked anywhere for dinner, so they just decided to wing it and see what looked good along the street. Try this sentence. I didn't prepare anything for the presentation. I just kind of winged it. Next, short-staffed, meaning a business or team doesn't have enough workers or employees to comfortably handle the current workload. Picture this. The restaurant was clearly short-staffed that night, with just 2 servers trying to manage a fully packed dining room. Try saying this. We've been really short-staffed at work lately, so everyone's stretched pretty thin. And here's a word that carries real emotional nuance. Picky. Being. Picky means being very selective or hard to please, especially about small details, often in a way that can frustrate other people. It's slightly informal but extremely common. Picture this. He wasn't usually this picky about restaurants. But tonight, after the day he'd had, even small annoyances felt bigger than they should. Try this sentence. I know I'm being a little picky about this, but it actually matters to me. Let's do another connected speech moment here, because kind of is one of the most commonly slurred phrases in real English, and you heard it earlier in this exact scene. Slow version. I was kind of being impatient. Fast, natural version. I was kinda being impatient, with kind of. Collapsing almost entirely into kinda. This happens constantly with sort of too, which often becomes sorta in fast, casual speech. Try saying both versions yourself. First, slowly. I was kind of impatient, sort of on edge, and now naturally, at speed, the way you'd actually say it to a friend. I was kinda impatient, sorta on edge. As dinner continues, the conversation naturally shifts towards something lighter, and Claire brings up an observation about Daniel's personality that introduces our next vocabulary. Cluster. This time centered on describing people, their strengths, and their quirks, which is some of the most useful vocabulary you'll ever learn for real conversations about the people in your life. Woof. Claire says, for someone who avoids confrontation, you're actually incredibly perceptive about other people. You always notice things before anyone else does. Daniel laughs and replies, I guess I've always paid close attention. I just don't always say what I notice out loud. Claire continues, that's such a shame, though, because when you do say it, you're usually right. Daniel shrugs and says, Maybe I need to work on being more forthcoming instead of just quietly observing everything. Claire nods. That would honestly change a lot of your relationships, both at work and outside of it. Let's break down two beautifully precise words here. First, perceptive, meaning someone who notices things quickly and clearly, often understanding people's feelings, motivations, or situations that others might miss entirely. Picture this. She'd always been remarkably perceptive, often sensing when something was wrong with a friend. Long before they said a single word about it, try this sentence. You're really perceptive. You noticed something was off before I even said anything. Next, forthcoming, meaning willing to freely share information, thoughts, or feelings without needing to be pushed or asked repeatedly. Repeatedly. This is a step above just being open. It implies a natural willingness to volunteer information. Picture this. He wasn't usually this forthcoming about his personal life, but something about tonight made him want to actually say what he was thinking. Try saying this. I appreciate you being so forthcoming with me. Most people wouldn't have shared that so honestly. Let's introduce two more personality words as their conversation deepens. Further, Claire mentions, you've always been a bit reserved, though, even with people who care about you. Daniel admits, yeah, I think that comes from growing up in a house where nobody really talked about feelings. I learned to keep things to myself. Claire responds gently. That makes sense. But you don't have to keep doing that here, with me, at least. Reserved describes someone who tends to keep their thoughts, feelings, or opinions private, often appearing quiet or distant, especially around people they don't know well. Picture this. He came across as reserved at first, but once you got to know him, he was actually one of the warmest people in the room. Try this sentence. I used to be really reserved around new people, but I've slowly become more comfortable opening up. And finally, in this block, let's add tenacious, meaning someone who holds firmly onto a goal, idea, or determination, refusing to give up, even when things get difficult. This is a genuinely admirable trait word, often used as a compliment. Picture this. Despite every setback, she remained tenacious, refusing to let one bad year define the rest of her career. Try saying this. You've always been so tenacious, even when everyone else would have quit. Let's do one more listening skill practice here, because I want you comfortable catching main meaning in longer, more complex sentences, not just short exchanges. Listen to this slightly longer, natural pace sentence, Claire might say, and just focus on catching the overall shape of the idea. Not every single word. I think, honestly, the reason you never say what you're actually thinking is that somewhere along the way you decided being quiet was safer than being honest, even though it's clearly not making you any happier. If you caught roughly, you stay quiet because you thought it was safer, but it's not making you happy. You caught exactly what mattered. Native listeners process long sentences exactly this way, chunk by chunk, meaning by meaning, not word by word. You're doing beautifully so far. Genuinely, we've now covered composed, frazzled, blurted out, snap, unrealistic, micromanage, dismissive, receptive, assertive, in denial, vent, putting on a front, blunt, accommodating, pushover, outburst, confrontation, outcome, ultimatum, follow through, wing it, short-staffed, picky, perceptive, forthcoming, reserved, and tenacious, all inside one continuous, real, emotional story, not a single isolated flashcard among them. Let's take one more short breathing pause here before we head into the final stretch of tonight's story, where Claire and Daniel's conversation moves toward resolution and where we'll pick up the pace, add a few more essential vocabulary blocks, and then move into your fluency round. Picture the restaurant now, warmly lit, the noise of other conversations blending softly into the background. Daniel looks genuinely more relaxed than he did an hour ago. Claire watches him for a moment before speaking again. Let this small pause settle for a second, the way real conversations naturally breathe between big moments. Okay, let's continue. Daniel breaks the quiet first. Can I ask you something honest? Claire nods, always. Daniel says, do you think I actually handle things badly? Or do you think I've just never had the tools to handle them well? Claire thinks about it for a second before answering, honestly, I think it's the second one. You're not bad at this, Daniel. You're just untrained. Nobody ever taught you how to be direct without exploding. Daniel exhales slowly and says, that's actually kind of a relief to hear. Claire continues, the good news is, tools can be learned. You're not stuck being the person who either says nothing or says too much all at once. Let's pull a genuinely valuable word from that moment, untrained. In this emotional context, untrained doesn't mean lacking a professional certificate. It means lacking the practiced skill or habit to handle something well, usually because no one ever taught or modeled it for you. Picture this. He wasn't bad at handling conflict. He was simply untrained, having grown up in a home where difficult conversations were avoided entirely. Try this sentence. I think I'm just untrained when it comes to setting boundaries. Not incapable of it. That leads perfectly into our next word, boundaries. In a personal or emotional sense, boundaries are the limits you set for yourself regarding how others are allowed to treat you, speak to you, or take up your time and energy. This word has become essential in modern English, and you'll hear it constantly in real conversations about relationships, work, and family. Picture this. She finally started setting boundaries with her family, learning to say no without feeling the need to explain herself endlessly. Try saying this. I'm working on setting better boundaries at work, especially around answering emails after hours. As dinner continues, Claire brings up something practical, and this introduces a workplace forward vocabulary cluster that will carry us into tomorrow's scene at Daniel's office. She says, "So, tomorrow, when you go back in, I want you to actually prepare. Don't just wing it again like today." Daniel laughs. "Fair. What should I actually say?" Claire responds, "Start by taking initiative. Don't wait for him to bring it up first. Walk in, ask for 5 minutes, and be candid. Tell him exactly what you told me tonight, minus the yelling." Daniel nods slowly. Take initiative. Be candid. Okay, I can do that. To take initiative means to take action on your own without waiting to be told or instructed, especially in situations where doing so shows leadership or responsibility. Picture this. Instead of waiting for permission, she took the initiative and redesigned the entire onboarding process herself, presenting it fully finished to her manager. Try this sentence. I think it's time I took the initiative instead of waiting for someone else to fix this. And candid, meaning openly and honestly truthful, especially in situations where people might normally soften the truth or avoid saying something uncomfortable. Picture this. He appreciated how candid she was, never sugarcoating feedback, even when it was hard to hear. Try saying this. I'm going to be candid with you because I think you'd rather hear the truth than a polite version of it. Let's slow down for another phonetic and rhythm moment. Because take initiative is a phrase that native speakers compress heavily in fast speech. Slow version. You need to take the initiative. Fast, natural version. You need to take the initiative. Spoken quickly becomes something closer to you needa take the initiative, with need to collapsing into needa, almost identical to how want to becomes wanna and got to becomes gotta. Try all three yourself. First slowly, then fast. I need to go becomes I need to go. I want to help becomes I want to help. I got to leave soon becomes I gotta leave soon. These reductions aren't slang. They're simply the natural rhythm of fast-spoken English, used by everyone from casual friends to professionals in relaxed conversation. Let's jump forward now to the next morning. Daniel walks into his manager's office. This is where we're going to build a longer role-play dialogue with the role switching technique fully in place and where several more advanced words will appear. Daniel knocks and says, "Do you have 5 minutes?" His manager, whose name is Robert, replies, "Of course, come in. I actually wanted to talk to you too." Daniel sits down and says, "I want to start by apologizing for yesterday. I let my frustration get the better of me, and that wasn't professional." Robert responds, "I appreciate that, but honestly, I've been reflecting on it too. Some of what you said was fair, even if the delivery was rough." Daniel continues, "I think the core issue is that I feel like my input gets overlooked, especially around timelines. I'm not trying to undermine your authority. I just want to feel like part of the decision-making process." Robert nods and says, "That's a completely reasonable thing to want. I'll admit, I've been so focused on external pressure from upper management that I haven't been as collaborative as I should have been. Daniel says, I appreciate you saying that. Going forward, I'd like us to check in weekly just briefly so I can flag concerns before they build up. Robert agrees. That sounds fair. Let's do that starting this week. Notice that this dialogue had 7 full exchanges, each one building naturally on the last, exactly the density of a real professional conversation, not a simplified textbook exchange. Let's pull out 4 rich words from it. First, overlooked, meaning failed to be noticed, considered, or given proper attention, often unintentionally. Picture this. Her contribution to the project was completely overlooked in the final presentation, even though the idea had originally been hers. Try this sentence. I felt overlooked during that discussion, like my point never really landed. Next, undermine, meaning to weaken someone's confidence, authority, or position. Often gradually, and sometimes unintentionally, through words or actions. Picture this. He didn't mean to undermine her authority in front of the team, but questioning her decision publicly had exactly that effect. Try saying this. I wasn't trying to undermine you. I just wanted to understand the reasoning better. Then, collaborative, meaning involving cooperation between people working together toward a shared goal rather than one person deciding. Picture this. The new manager took a far more collaborative approach, actually asking the team for input before finalizing any major decisions. Try this. I really value a collaborative environment where everyone's input actually gets considered. And finally, to flag something, in this professional sense, means to point out or draw attention to an issue or concern early before it becomes a bigger problem. Picture this. She made a habit of flagging small concerns immediately, rather than letting them quietly pile up into resentment. Try saying this. I just wanted to flag this early, before it becomes a bigger issue down the line. Let's pause for a quick main meaning listening drill again, this time with a longer, faster sentence because your ear needs to keep stretching. Listen to this without trying to catch every word. Look, I get that upper management's been breathing down your neck about deadlines. But that doesn't mean it's okay for stuff to just get dumped on us last minute without any warning. If you caught something like, management's pressuring him about deadlines, but that doesn't make it okay to dump last-minute work on the team without warning. You got exactly the meaning that mattered. Notice also the idiom, breathing down your neck, meaning to closely and persistently pressure or watch someone, often in an uncomfortable way. Picture this. With the deadline just 2 days away, his manager was practically breathing down his neck every hour, checking on progress constantly. Try saying this. I can't focus properly when someone's breathing down my neck the entire time. Let's do your third role play moment now. And this time, I want you to practice both sides briefly, switching roles the way real conversations sometimes require when you're imagining how someone else might respond. I'll read Robert's line, you respond as Daniel, and then I'll read a sample, Daniel response, and then I'll give you a short prompt to respond as Robert too, so you can feel both directions of a real exchange. Ready? Robert says, I want to be fair here, Daniel, but I also need you to trust the process a bit more, even when it's frustrating. Now pause and respond as Daniel, out loud. Here's a sample response. I want to trust it, Robert. I really do. But it's hard to trust a process where I feel like I'm always the last to know about changes. Good. Now let's flip it. Imagine Daniel just said that same line to you, and now I want you to respond as Robert. Out loud, using your own words, maybe using collaborative or flag if it fits naturally. Here's a sample response for that side too. That's fair, and honestly, that's on me. Let's make sure you're flagged in earlier from now on, especially with anything time-sensitive. Notice how naturally flag got reused there, this time as flagged in, a slightly different grammatical form of the exact word you just learned, which is precisely the kind of flexible, real usage that separates advanced speakers from memorizers. Let's shift now toward the emotional resolution of this story. Because Daniel's conversation with Robert is about to close on a note that introduces our final major vocabulary cluster, words around personal growth, relief, and moving forward, which is some of the most emotionally resonant vocabulary in the entire English language. As the meeting wraps up, Robert says, Mott or Ken. Mott or Ken. For what it's worth, I think you handled today really well. A lot more composed than yesterday. Daniel smiles slightly and says, Yeah, well, I had a good talk with a friend last night. Turns out, I just needed someone to be blunt with me. Robert laughs. Sounds like a good friend. Daniel replies, the best. Anyway, thank you for actually hearing me out today. Robert says, thank you for coming back and having this conversation instead of just quietly quitting. Notice how naturally composed and blunt got reused here. Words you learned nearly 40 minutes ago in this lesson, now appearing effortlessly in a completely new context. That's not an accident. That's the entire design of this method, vocabulary that returns to you naturally because it was never isolated in the first place. Let's add two final emotionally rich words before we move into your self-practice exercise and fluency round. First, vindicated. To feel vindicated means to feel that you were right about something, especially after being doubted, criticized, or dismissed, and now having that proven true. Picture this. When the new policy failed exactly as she'd predicted, she didn't feel smug, just quietly vindicated after months of being ignored. Try this sentence. I finally feel vindicated after all those months of being told I was overreacting. And finally, closure, meaning a feeling of resolution or completion after a difficult experience. allowing you to emotionally move forward instead of staying stuck in unresolved feelings. Picture this. The conversation didn't fix everything overnight, but it gave him the closure he needed to stop replaying yesterday's outburst over and over in his head. Try saying this: I just needed some closure, even if the outcome wasn't perfect. Now let's move into your sensory self-practice exercise for this lesson, because I want you to actually use today's vocabulary in a spoken, personal way, connected to your own real environment right now. Here's my model first. Right now, I feel pretty composed, even though my day was a little frazzled earlier. I don't need to vent about anything. Honestly, I feel a small sense of closure just from getting through this lesson. Now it's your turn. Pause for 30 seconds and describe how you're feeling right now, using at least 2 or 3 of today's words. Marza. Whatever genuinely fits your actual mood and surroundings. Welcome back. However that felt, you just activated real spoken production again, layering emotional vocabulary onto your actual life, which is exactly how fluency gets built, one honest sentence at a time. Let's move into the final stretch of tonight's lesson, and I want to add one more layer to this story before we reach the fluency round, because there's a technique used by only the most advanced English learners, and I want you walking away from this video already using it. Reflective narration. Describing not just what happened, but how it changed you. This is where advanced English truly separates itself from intermediate English, in the ability to talk about growth, not just events. A few days pass in our story. Claire and Daniel meet again, this time for a relaxed walk in the evening. No crisis this time, just 2 friends catching up. Let's listen to how Daniel describes the last few days, and notice how differently he speaks now compared to the frazzled, blurted-out apology from the beginning of this lesson. Daniel says, "It's strange, but that whole confrontation with Robert ended up being one of the best things that's happened to me this year." Claire smiles and says, "Really? Tell me more." Daniel continues, "I think I spent so long being the accommodating one, the reserved one, that I never realized how much resentment was quietly building underneath it. Being assertive that day, even messily, cracked something open." Claire nods thoughtfully and asks, "So what's different now?" Daniel responds, "I'm more forthcoming. If something bothers me, I actually say it, calmly, before it turns into an outburst. I set boundaries now, instead of just absorbing everything silently." Claire says, "That's genuinely such a big shift." Daniel laughs a little and adds, "It is. I used to think being a pushover meant being kind. Now I know those are 2 completely different things." Notice how many words from across this entire lesson just returned naturally in a single short conversation. Accommodating, reserved, resentment, assertive, forthcoming, boundaries, outburst, pushover. None of these were re-explained. None needed to be. Your brain already owns them now because they arrived through story, not through a list. Let's add 2 final words to close out our vocabulary for today, both connected to this idea of personal transformation. First, resentment, meaning a lasting feeling of bitterness or anger towards someone or something, usually because of unfair treatment that was never properly addressed or resolved. Picture this. Years of small, unspoken frustrations had quietly turned into deep resentment. The kind that doesn't disappear just because you stop mentioning it out loud. Try this sentence. I don't want to build resentment over small things, so I've started saying what actually bothers me. And finally, our last word for today, self-aware. Being self-aware means having a clear, honest understanding of your own emotions, behavior, and how you affect the people around you. It's one of the most respected personality traits in modern English-speaking culture, often used as a genuine compliment. Picture this. What impressed Claire most wasn't that Daniel had changed overnight, but that he'd become so self-aware about exactly why he needed to. Try saying this sentence. I'm trying to be more self-aware about how I react under pressure instead of just reacting on autopilot. Let's do one final phonetic and rhythm moment before your fluency round, because I want to leave you with one more genuinely useful listening pattern. The way native speakers stack short words together at the end of sentences without much separation. Must first. Listen to this sentence slowly first. I don't want to build resentment over it. Now listen to it at natural speed. I don't wanna build resentment over it, with don't want to, almost fusing into a single rhythmic unit. Don't wanna. This kind of stacking happens constantly with phrases like going to, which becomes gonna, have to, which becomes have to, and should have, which becomes shoulda. Try all 3 quickly out loud. I'm going to try becomes I'm gonna try. I have to admit becomes I have to admit. I should have said something sooner becomes I shoulda said something sooner. None of these are lazy pronunciations. They are simply how real, natural, native rhythm behaves. And now your ear is trained to expect them instead of being surprised by them. Now, before we finish, let's do a proper shadowing explanation, because I've asked you to shadow throughout this lesson, but I want to make sure you fully understand the technique itself, not just the instruction. Shadowing means listening to a sentence and repeating it back almost simultaneously, like an echo trailing just half a second behind the original voice, rather than waiting until the sentence completely finishes before you respond. This trains your mouth, your rhythm, and your listening speed, all at the same time, because you don't have time to translate. You only have time to imitate the sound and shape of what you're hearing. Let's practice it properly. Right now, one final time. I'm going to say a sentence, and I want you to start repeating it almost immediately, trailing just slightly behind my voice, not waiting for me to finish. Ready? I used to think being a pushover meant being kind. Say it now, trailing right behind, matching the rhythm as closely as you can. Even if it feels slightly uncomfortable at first, because that discomfort is exactly where real progress happens. Now, here's your fluency round, the fast-paced review where we're going to move through every major word from today's lesson. Quickly, one after another, without slowing down to explain them again. Your job is simply to say each word out loud. The instant you hear it, trusting the meaning that's now already living in your memory, connected to Claire, to Daniel, to that cafe, that restaurant, that office. Ready? Composed, frazzled, blurted out, snap, unrealistic, micromanage, dismissive, receptive, assertive, in denial, vent, putting on a front, blunt, accommodating, pushover, outburst, confrontation, outcome, ultimatum, follow through, wing it, short-staffed, picky, perceptive, forthcoming, reserved, tenacious, untrained, boundaries, take initiative, candid, overlooked, undermine, collaborative, flag, breathing down your neck, vindicated, closure, resentment, self-aware. That's 39 advanced words and phrases, every single one of them already tied to a real moment, a real feeling, a real conversation you followed from beginning to end today. Say them again if you want, faster this time, because repetition at this stage isn't about learning anymore. It's about ownership. Here's your call to action, and I want it to actually be specific, not just like and subscribe, and nothing more. Before you close this video, write one sentence in the comments using at least one word from today, describing something real from your own life, your own week, your own feelings. It doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be honest, and it needs to be yours. Because that single act of production, choosing a word and applying it to your real life, will do more for your fluency than passively watching 10 more videos like this one. If you genuinely felt your listening stretch today, especially in that fast, real conversation between Claire and Daniel that once would have overwhelmed you, subscribe, because every single video on this channel is built exactly this way. Real vocabulary, wrapped inside real emotional stories, never isolated, never abstract. You started this lesson comfortable with slow, easy English, the kind that asks nothing difficult of you. You're ending it having processed fast, natural, emotionally complex conversation, catching main meaning even when every word didn't register clearly, recognizing connected speech patterns like dunno, kinda, gonna, and shoulda without flinching, and actively producing advanced vocabulary about yourself, out loud, unprompted. That's not a small shift. That's the exact gap between someone who understands English and someone who lives inside it. I'll see you in the next lesson, where we'll walk into another real conversation, another real story, and another set of words. you'll actually remember, because you'll have felt them, not just heard them.